Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a 737 pilot and a member of PMDG's tech team. In today's video, let's have a look at the perfect rotation. We'll start with a little bit of theory and then we'll go over into the practical phase. So, theory. Everybody of you knows that we start the rotation at VR, but what is the exact definition of VR? And this might surprise a couple of you. So, quote from skyberry.io. VR is defined as the speed at which the rotation of the aircraft should be initiated to takeoff attitude. VR cannot be less than V1. Quote end. So, note the word should be initiated to takeoff attitude. It does not mean that the nose wheel has to come off the ground immediately at VR, which is what I see quite a lot of flight simmers actually doing when I'm looking at live streams and YouTube videos. In other words, when we are reaching VR, we will slowly start pulling back on the control column until the nose starts to come off the ground, but the nose must not immediately rise. So that is totally acceptable, and that is how we do it in real life as well. If you just yank on the control column to get the nose up immediately at VR, then chances are you are doing something wrong. Let's have a quick look into the flight crew training manual now. Since this is primarily a 737 channel, I'm going to quote out of that one, but the same general techniques apply to pretty much all non-fly-by-wire aircraft. So here we go. Takeoff speeds are established based on minimum control speeds, stall speed, and tail clearance margins. Shorter-bodied airplanes are normally governed by stall speed margin, while longer-bodied airplanes are normally limited by tail clearance margin. When a smooth continuous rotation is initiated at VR, tail clearance margin is assured because computed takeoff speeds depicted in the different takeoff analysis tools that we have available are developed to provide adequate tail clearance. From above 80 knots, relax the control column pressure to neutral position. For optimum takeoff and initial climb performance, initiate a smooth continuous rotation at VR towards the target pitch attitude appropriate for the airplane that you are flying. Now, in the A310, that is 12.5 degrees, so the first indicator above the 10 degree mark up here. For the 737, it's 15 degrees of pitch attitude, and it might be a very good idea just to research that value for the particular aircraft type that you are flying, because it will help you with maintaining and controlling the speed initially on the takeoff. However, takeoffs at low thrust setting with low excess energy will result in a lower initial pitch attitude target to achieve the desired climb speed. In other words, if you're doing your calculation and using the optimum values, like we did up here in the EFB, it tells me for the current conditions, flex temperature 59 degrees is optimum, and we have indeed set that on the thrust control computer. Similarly, in the 737, when you're using the EFB, then most rotations will feel similar, but there might be conditions under which you cannot derate, for example due to gusty winds, in which you will have to use more thrust. And in those cases, obviously a higher initial pitch attitude will also be needed. So the pilot has to adapt here a little bit. The use of stabilizer trim during rotation is not recommended. After liftoff, use the attitude indicator or indications on the primary flight display or head-up display if equipped on the aircraft as the primary pitch reference. The flight director, in conjunction with indicated airspeed and other flight instruments, is used to maintain proper vertical flight path. Note, the flight director pitch command is not used for rotation. And we have seen what happens if people try to use it. Just think of that Emirates accident which overran the runway at 240 knots and then just barely made it across the rooftops at the end of the runway. So be very sure, only start using your flight director once you have achieved the initial pitch attitude target. So 12.5 in the 310, 15 in the 737. With a consistent rotation technique, where the pilot uses approximately equal control forces and similar visual cues, resultant rotation rate differs slightly depending upon airplane body length. Now, that very much applies to the 737. I'm not so sure how much it would apply to other aircraft types. It probably still applies generally, but I thought it might still be good to read that one out for you. And note, do not adjust takeoff speeds or control forces to compensate for increased body length. So that is very important here. We're currently sitting in the A310-300. Now, If we ever happened to get an A300-600, which is quite a bit longer than the A310, just use the takeoff speeds provided. Don't change your takeoff speeds or rotation angle, because everything is taken into account for you when those speeds are calculated. So using the technique above, resultant rotation rates vary from 2 to 3 degrees per second, with rates being lowest on longer airplanes. Lift-off attitude is achieved in approximately 3 to 4 seconds depending on the airplane weight and thrust setting. So that's the theory that we had to discuss behind this. Now let's have a look into how we actually do this practically. So, as said, as soon as we reach VR, which in this case is calculated at 135 knots, and keep in mind that may not be less than V1, but they may be equal, as they are right now. As soon as we reach VR, we are going to start to smoothly initiate our rotation. Smoothly literally means this. And not this. And eventually the nose will start coming up. When the nose comes up, that's the point where I would normally freeze the control column in position and see how the resultant rotation rate is. And if we are going up by approximately 1 marker on the ADI per second, then we are normally very good in terms of the rotation rate. Now, for example, in the Airbus A320, you aim to rotate a bit faster, like 3 to 3.5 degrees a second. In the 737, it's 2 to 2.5 degrees a second. But generally, 1 marker on the ADI per second works pretty well for the vast majority of different aircraft types. So, we've been talking quite a lot. Let's actually get into it, and let's start flying. So, stabilized. Set takeoff thrust. It might be a good idea to release the parking brake as well. That certainly helps. Bit of forward control column pressure here, until about 80 knots. And we have takeoff thrust set, indications normal. .100 knots. We'll look downwards a little bit so that you can see my control column a bit better. V1 rotate. So, pull until it starts coming off the ground, and then just about hold it there. Gear up. Forward freight. In this case, we're now just following the flight director command bar. It will aim to maintain a V2 plus 10 speed. And we can see V2 up here 170 knots, and we are maintaining around 175 knots using the flight director command bar. So that is actually quite a good number. Right, reaching acceleration altitude, nose can come down. We can retract the flaps on schedule, and that is about it for our departure already. So, as you can see, once again, maintaining correct pitch attitude targets, which in the end adds up to being, once again, the standard flying, so pitch and power equals performance, and this is pretty much the same iteration once again. For now, thank you very much for watching, everyone. I hope that you have enjoyed this one. I hope that you can use it to perfect your rotation, and I'm looking forward to welcoming you again on board for the next video. If you haven't done so yet, like, comment and subscribe, and if you really want to support me, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me a Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm looking forward to welcome you all again on the next one.